so that not everybody's back, I can correct myself in a few areas of mistakes without embarrassing myself in front of everybody. Two things. Number one is it's very likely that Nagarjuna's teacher was male and not female, and only number 9 in the sequence is the one that they're not sure of, who's female or male. So male for before Nagarjuna's teacher. So the other correction is Caddy is right about the Abhidhamma Kosa, and that that was composed by Vasubandhu and not by I was confused because the text that is probably the one that he may have been reading is called the Abhidhamma Samuccaya. Samuccaya. Abhidhamma Samuccaya, Samuccaya. And that was possibly the one that he may have been reading from. Not likely to, but it could have been the Mahayana Samgraha, but that's probably going to be later. But in any event, that's the Caddy. So you were correct about that. I was incorrect about my Abhidharma sections. So thank you for correcting. Yes. Oh.
We just had this yesterday's class, Abhidhamma Kosa.
Oh yeah. Okay, very good. So I should have maybe attended. That would have helped me by a lot. Yes.
I think we're all here, so you can
start. And did you say that Pete was coming in and out, or he was here? Is he back for the afternoon or not yet? He's the one auditor. Did I have any other auditors today?
I don't see Pete back from lunch yet.
Okay. Were there other auditors that were in today? Was there a Brandy or a Andrew? Andy? No. Okay. All right. Okay. Just wondered. Okay. Was Gary? Was there a Gary in B? Okay. Very good. Okay. So we left off with the stream of consciousness, and so I have just 2 more slides in this group, and then we'll go on into the Changwei Shalon. So just a couple of things. So the one verse that I wanted to highlight was the verse that said that that the Alaya Vijnana is in perpetual evolution like a violent torrent. And so I wanted to explain this a little bit more. So that the violent torrent in the Alaya Vijnana is, it means a turbulent flow of stream or river, and violent and liu is to flow, a current, and the actual word for this is related term to tanyu, which means to suffer because of sense-based phenomenon, attachment, and the yu in tanyu also is a kind of torrent as well, is a picture of a person being swept down a stream, and they can't breathe. They're in a gorge and the water is coming to swallow them up. So this is a different kind of torrent of water that is very powerful, that just carries us along, unstoppable, appearing to be unstoppable through the cycle of birth and death. So this is referred to as this torrent. And as we see, this torrent is what it is that we want to transform. When we calm our mind and we try to sit, we can see how much force there is in the torrent. If we really concentrate well, we can feel the torrent of water energy. It's not water, but the thought energy, the intensity of the manas in the mind. So now we go on to the next set of slides in we can look at now we're going to actually enter into the Chung Wei Shalun by Xuanzang, and we're going to see his commentary on these 30 verses. And the next slide is actually the structure of the entire Chung Wei Shalun. Of all of the chapters, the books, there are 9 books in all. You can see that he follows closely the teachings on the 30 verses, and through the different sections of the 30 verses. And if you go into the next slide, you can see I've made even a deeper sub-chapter headings of each one of the chapters, for those people who are interested in how things are broken down, when he discusses what, and how this is, and you can see that there are terms in here that we're not terribly familiar with. I'll do my best to kind of hit some of the highlights of the Chung Wei Shalun, because you see that it's 9 books long, and each one of these books explains in details the different sections of the Chung Wei Shalun of the 30 verses. And so it would take years for us to go through all of this. So this is a way of being able to understand what's called the non-substantial hypothesis. We're coming back to this Vijnati Matrata concept again. So the and I put the Chinese here for those people who are familiar. The non-substantial hypothesis is that there is no substantial entity or individual, no subjective aspect or an objective aspect, no real self and real phenomenon, no real subject or object, but all is just transient emotion is the word that's used here. I haven't gone into a lot of detail here. Actually, Dharmakirti, Dharmapala, who's one of the commentators, says that subject and object actually have some relationship with each other, and the relationships that they create with each other actually makes it look real, whereas some of the other commentators don't go into that level of trying to explain subject and object. When you get into Sang San, for example, when he talks about subject and object, and Farong, you see in the Chan school how they deal with dualistic notions as well. But this is the root of all of this, happens in the Chung Wei Shalun and its interpretation of the 30 verses. Okay.
Which PowerPoint are we looking at now?
I'm in the second half of part 3.
Ah, okay.
All right. Okay. So the next part has to do with the manas and the 4 views of self that I touched on. Whoops, okay, oh, I'm sorry, the one before this. And so I made many different diagrams of the 8 consciousnesses. I've sliced it up in different ways, like the anatomy of the brain or the anatomy of the mind. You can slice it one way or slice it another way. You can look at it from the front, the back, the bottom, and the top. So here I'm just going to present some different pictures of the 8 consciousnesses, and maybe one of them will make it easier for you. I'm hoping that some of them will make it easier for you. So we have, in this one, we have the 5 consciousnesses of sight, hearing, smell, etc. And that is taken in by the Manovijnaya, the discriminating consciousness. And then that is received by the thinking and the self-making consciousness that then takes as its object the storehouse consciousness. So the number 7 is in between and gets information and influences both. We'll talk about how this influence happens. So this is kind of like the Venn diagram version of consciousness. and I had to kind of overlay my terminology here because the other terminology that they used in the original diagram wasn't really that good. So here, the manas, that's caught in between, in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, says the manas function concurrently with the storehouse consciousness without lapse. You should know that it is therefore always functioning in every given moment concurrently with this view of the self and conceit and love of self and the ignorance of the delusion about the nature of self. And you should know that these four afflictions are continuously active without being in conflict with the good factors and so on. Remember, those are the other mental factors. And regardless of whether or not one is engaged in a meditative state, this is what is meant by the term obscured moral indeterminacy. We talked a little bit about that before. So I know that it takes a long time to get familiar with all these concepts, but let's just go to Xuanzang's Chenmoi Shalun view of the manas. And here we have this, remember, manas here is a singular word that just means seventh consciousness or self-consciousness. And here in the Chinese and in the, we have the Sanskrit, we have the Chinese, we have the translation by different folks. Muller is the person who is actually the person who oversees the DDB, the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism. Very, very important resource for those of us who are looking at understanding Chinese Buddhism. So here we have the self-delusion, self-belief or self-view, self-conceit or self-identity, and self-love. These are the things that really get us into trouble because the self really doesn't exist the way that we think that it does. And if you go to the next one, you can see Papancha, the Changwei Shalun, and the Diamond Sutra, how they treat these same ideas. So we have the Changwei Shalun version, and we have the Diamond Sutra version, where we have the Diamond Sutra kind of switches. If anyone's asked the Buddha, asks you if does the Buddha speak of a self view, a person view, a living being view, or a lifespan view? That's in the last chapter of the Diamond Sutra. And of course, if a person says that, they don't understand the teachings of the Buddha, because he doesn't speak about those things. It's for those people who remember that. Okay, now, now we're going to jump into back to understanding Alambana, and I've introduced the term before, so I'm hoping that you now begin to have an understanding about Alambana. And Alambana is one of the activities that takes place in our consciousness to try to make sense of the sequence of how things happen. So it's a sequential causal relationship, similar to the 12 links of dependent origination, but this is specifically related to how it is that the mind grabs onto things independently of being controlled by the sense bases. This is how the mind itself is coordinating what it is that's going on. So this is what the mind consciousness is doing more than the senses. So in Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka, the percept object is not the same as in Xuanzang, as I've said. In the Hetu, the bijas are the cause. These are the seeds. And Alambana is a separate category. It is not a separate support condition, but a mode of activity for all the other conditions. So this is the importance of Alambana. And again, Alambana has many levels of meaning, so I'm going to try to explain this. So in order to understand this, we need to have an understanding of what's called Ashraya, or Ashreya, the support or the base. Remember, we looked at Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Transformations of the Base. Well, the base is this word, Ashreya. All the mind systems, the mind and mental properties have supports. And there are these kinds of supports. So the supports are actually linked to these conditions. So there's the Hetu Pratyaya Ashreya, which is the causal condition. Now remember, this is very similar to the Nagarjuna, but now it's expanded into this notion of it being a base for the Alaya Vijnana, for our consciousness. And so all conditioned dharmas come into being by virtue of this kind of support, because they cannot be born without the seeds, which are their causal condition and their condition. Maybe we can have the translation of the Latin here from Lee. Lee, you have to unmute yourself. Bar none, here is a sine qua non. Is everybody there? Okay, not there? Okay, maybe Lee stepped away.
No, I'm here.
Oh,
I just had to close out so many screens to get back to the main screen.
Okay, so conditio sine qua non in Latin means?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not familiar with it.
Oh no, I thought it was a legal term. Okay, no problem. I think it means bar none. Yeah, that's okay. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's all right.
Okay, all right. So if anybody else knows it, you can chime in. Okay. Anyway, so here we got the second condition, which here is adipata, the environmental condition. Notice that the order is a little bit different. And this is any extraneous condition. So for example, we could say we have the condition of the earth, and it has changes in its weather. And the changes in the weather, it has a causal condition, which is the earth actually becoming its own planet and being so far from the sun, et cetera. And now the environmental condition are all of the conditions that affect or so the earth and how it warms up and how it cools down, et cetera. So when we have a large asteroid that hits the Earth during the Jurassic period, 350 million years ago, and it wipes out the planet in a certain sense, and all the dinosaurs are become extinct. They have no food to eat. We have this big cloud of dust, and the planet becomes very cold. And after years of the dust being there, these are environmental conditions. So remember that when we talk about consciousness, there are different types of consciousness that are talked about, and it's not as explicit as it should be. We have one kind of consciousness, which is all conditioned things have consciousness, even the rocks. But when it comes to sentient beings, that just has to do with beings that have the ability to have self-awareness. So that's the animal kingdom, insects, etc., things like that, things that are living beings on that level. We don't really perceive plant beings as having sentience, although some people will question that. But generally speaking, we don't think certainly of rocks as having sentience. So, but all of these external conditions, the simultaneous support, okay. And then the third condition is the word anuttara is actually preceded by the word sam anuttara, the preceding moment, but it's not just the anuttara preceding moment. Sam, in this case, means sequencing. This means that that it's just extended. every moment has a preceding moment. So you have this sequence that is taking place. So it's not just the immediate antecedent moment, but it's would be the moment before that and the moment before that, because it's all interconnected. Okay. But usually they talk about it as just the antecedent moment. Okay. And then the fourth condition, alambana, again, translated as percept object, which is not something that I like so much. It's impossible to comprehend completely, which makes me feel better. And what it holds and receives, its place and locality, and its power of perception and discrimination are things that we try to investigate. And at all times, it is connected to the 5 mental attributes that we talked about before in the construct of Emily Sue. It's always associated with equanimity. Okay, so from the Chung Wei Shalun, consciousness is the storehouse consciousness, and the consciousness that perceives and discriminates between things is a 6th consciousness, and in between them is this manas consciousness. Okay. All right. So moving to the next one. I think that's the last slide in that group. And now we can go to number 4 as we're moving along. So my number 4 as well. All right. Okay. More colors. Try to make it a little more colorful for everybody as we go into the 8 consciousnesses and the seeds. So it is my hope that this particular sequence of slides will be comprehensible to all, and that if that's as far as we go in terms of our understanding, you've done a great deal of wonderful concentrating and awareness during our seminar today. This is the key component. So hopefully we'll make sense of things. So now we're going to the 3rd slide, Vijnapti Matrata. Try saying that to yourself out loud a few times, meaning mere consciousness. So Vijnapti Matrata is the theory that everything exists only in the mind. And according to Vijnapti Matrata, enlightenment is the realization of the imaginary status of phenomenon and the non-substantiality of the self and external objects. All experience and all objects are mere constructions of consciousness, including what is called self. Remember that the construction of this consciousness is not the self, because if you make that mistake, then you think you're creating the world. And that would be a big mistake, and that could lead to some serious trouble. There have been many people throughout history who make this mistake, and they believe that they're able to construct the world. And they usually make a huge mess. Okay, so we're not saying that. So we're saying that this consciousness, which is not the self, this mere representation in the Yogacara theory, that the contents of everyday unenlightened experiences are merely false superimpositions of dualistic concepts generated by the mind that prevent direct experience of reality as it truly is, yata bhuta. So this, if you look at the sequence that complements the 12 links of dependent origination, you will find that in another sutta, the Buddha gives 12 additional stages of dependent origination that have to do with starting with faith and going all the way up to liberation. And one of those states is called the direct experience of reality as it truly is. So very important to realize that this is not something that we have to create. We don't have to work to create it. We just have to get rid of the things that are getting in the way of our truly being able to see things clearly. Okay. So Vijnaptimatrata, again, all Mahayana teachings are connected to the original Dharma, teachings of the Buddha. So the meaning of consciousness only is connected to the original teachings of the Buddha. And if you know what to look for, it's easy to find. Look just at the first verse of the Dhammapada. Phenomenon are preceded by the mind, ruled by the mind, made of the mind. If you speak or act with a corrupted mind, then suffering follows you as the wheel of the cart follows the track of the ox that pulls it. Phenomenon are preceded by the mind, ruled by the mind, made of the mind. If you speak or act with a calm, bright mind, then happiness follows you like a shadow that never leaves. So the actual Pali goes like this, and pay attention to how often this word mano shows up. Remember mano? Mano is mano vijnaya. This is the sixth consciousness. Mano pubabagama dhamma mano seta mano maya. So the word for mental here is not chitta, not vijnana, not cheta. It is mano. Mano means the discriminating mind. Here the word for mind is mano. Discriminating mind is the organizing function that takes all the contact from the five senses and observes and discriminates one object experience from another. So if you look at something, it's a desk, it's a chair, but this is even preceding necessarily putting names on things. If you spend time with a little child, you see the little child is observing, and discriminating between the different objects. They don't know initially what the objects are, but they know that they're different. So this observing and discriminating mind is the main function of the mano. And that's what it is. This is part of the entire sequence of consciousness that goes from mano to manas to aleya. This is all interconnected, and that's what makes the mind. That's what makes our experience. The phenomena are preceded by this mind, ruled and made of by the mind. Okay. Now, in this way, the world, asleep with a sleep that is the residue of the imposition of false conceptualizing, is seeing as in a dream the non-existent external referent. So this is Vasubandhu's words from a commentary. Yes. So Vijnapti Matrata Siddhi, or the establishment that there is only consciousness. The universe is certainly Vijnapti only, since there are appearances of non-existent external references, as when someone with an eye disease sees the non-existent knot of hair and so on. Oh, I'm so fortunate. I have this tremendous advantage because I have these amazing floaters in my eye, and sometimes when I look at something, I see like a spider web, like a knot of hair, and it looks like it's something real there. Maybe I think, oh, maybe this is something I need to grab and move, but it's really just something that my eye is just creating. We'll talk a little bit more about the magic trick of the mind a little bit later. So Vijnapti is a technical term, originally from the Sarvastivadana Abhidharma, which Vasubandhu here appropriated and used in the special sense. The ordinary parlance of Vijnapti means is Vijnati in Pali. Now I'm going to explain this word, means information or the act of informing someone. That is a report or a proclamation, especially a report to a superior, hence maybe like a request. And the word matra means measure or extent. Mind only means consisting only of the mind. So the word choice of Vasubandhu is not Vijnana, consciousness, but Vijnati, meaning a momentary act of consciousness. Not the stream of consciousness, but the momentary act of the consciousnesses working together. I hope that that's clear. Maybe I will stop here for just a moment and take some questions, because this is a very important stage, so that now all of you are way ahead of most people. You know what Vijnapti means, maybe. So please, if you have any questions as you contemplate this, feel free to ask. Just unmute yourself. Otherwise, go ahead.
I have a question on the external environment cause. Would that also have something to do with the energy, or let's say the vibration that you have somehow will attract to a certain energy field, which will give you the external environment conditions?
So when we get to bija, the seeds, we will see that this interconnection between what the mind is attracted to is connected to the seeds. So you're exactly on track. Good question.
Thank you.
When we get to seeds, hopefully that will explain that. Because if you have certain seeds in your mind, well, and they've done experiments on this. They've taken people, for example, who have an addiction to cocaine, and they've relocated them to another city. And within a few days, they will find people who are addicted to cocaine.
Okay.
I actually had a patient who had an alcohol addiction, very bad, and he had a new job offer in another city, I think Denver, and he moved to Denver, and his resoluteness was, now that I'm getting away from all of these conditions in St. Louis that caused me to drink, I won't have to drink. So 2 days after he moved, he was totally intoxicated. And he had trouble, not able to stop. So yes, this is the bijas in the mind, the seed in the mind, very strong. Yes. Of course, we can also understand some of the factors that relate to DNA and things like that. But certainly at this time, the bijas was the explanation. Yes. Any other questions?
Are we on slide 8?
We are on slide, yes, slide
Okay, good.
8. Yeah. I'm assuming that everybody has gotten it, that they all know what the difference is between Vijnapti and Vijnana, because that'll be on the test. Okay.
I do have a question here from Jade. It
Okay,
says,
Jade. Okay, where's Jade?
she wrote it in the chat. Do you
Okay.
want to say this, Jade?
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Hi, Uncle Don. Since you just mentioned the discriminating mind, I am reminded of a 3 minds theory you once brought up in a Dharma talk. Just want to verify the accuracy of my memory. Are the 3 minds the discriminating mind, the discursive mind, and the wisdom mind? If so, a follow-up question is what is the differences between the discriminating and discursive minds?
Okay. So discriminating mind, tell Jade that her memory is very good. And the discriminating mind is the mind that takes information from the senses and makes sense out of it, and also tries to make sense out of its own way of being able to think about how these things are organized. So it's really an observing and organizing function. So we call that discriminating. Discursive mind means the mind is going around and around the ego self. And it's telling stories. Papancha, Shi Lun. You know, Shi Lun. Shi means
Yes.
sports, and Lun means commentary. Sports commentary. This is ESPN. The mind on ESPN. It has to discuss the event before it happens. Then it has to be discussing the event while it happens, and then it has to talk about it afterwards. And so this is always the self is the center of the drama rama. This is the discursive mind. And so then the mind that is wisdom mind is, I don't remember which terms that I use, but that's a good one. This mind realizes that all of this function that's going on in Papancha is really just an illusion, and is able to go through the process of turning about, Zhuan, turning about, and making the transformation of the mind that I will be talking about. And so each one of the consciousnesses become transformed.
Thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay. Is that you, Jade, there? No, that's somebody else. Oh, it's Jade. Okay, I could only see the top half of you. I didn't see your... Where are you at Maba in your room? Okay, very good. Excellent. Jade, you have been a wonderful help to me. Without your help, I would have spent many, many hours getting lost. So very, very helpful. And Jade and I have been doing some investigation of different sources and resources. And every once in a while, I come up with something that is like a controversy. And Jade says, yes, you're right, it's a controversy. And then I feel better. Okay, let's go to the next one here, which is the 8 consciousnesses. This is another slice of the pie. I'm just showing you another view of the consciousnesses. Hopefully that these consciousnesses will, one of these views will help you to see things clearly. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the next one. The one with the different color circles. All right. So now we have the observing, discriminating mind, number 6 on the outside, that gets the information from the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. And then that information ends up being the source of the self-referential mind, or the self-generating mind, the discursive mind. And then that mind becomes, takes as its object this torrent of the storehouse consciousness, and sees that as the self, and of some kind of inherently existing, eternal being that's going to go to, so either, in personality is going to be continuing, which is the big mistake, according to Yogacara Buddhism. And this is the Alaya Vijnana. But also the self-referential mind distorts what it is that it's seeing, and believes that what it's seeing is actually some kind of solid reality, and makes sense out of it from its own point of view. Okay, we can go to the next one. All right. So, okay. The 3 objective conditions for valid cognition. So in order to be able to say that our cognition is valid, we first look at the body and sense faculties. The body and sensory faculties are formed by the seeds common to species and to the individual seeds that constitute the visual and other sensory apparatuses. So this is why we believe that when we look at something, it looks real to us. And that's why it gets registered in the Alaya Vijnana as something that is true and real. And then it distorts everything, and we begin to believe that this reality is the only reality that's there, not realizing that it's just one of the layers of things that are made by our senses. So the second is called, all right, now we have the basis, the shared seeds common to the sensory world and inhabited by beings who derive sensory utility from it. So in other words, what happens is that because we have the same eyeballs, for example, we pretty much have the same view, more or less, of reality. So that most of us, when we're driving down the road, we see cars in front of us and we avoid trees and things like that because our eyes are constructed to be able to look at things at that particular level. So even the cars that we have made have been designed to work within that visual field. If we had a different visual field, we wouldn't be relating to things on that level. We wouldn't be creating cars and we wouldn't be worried about those kinds of things because our visual field would be giving us a whole different sense of reality, and we construct other things to help us negotiate that other level of reality. So if we lived in the quantum world, we'd be creating other utilities to help us negotiate the quantum world, and we would think that that's all there is. I don't know if Pete is here or not, our quantum rabbit. I don't know if he came back this afternoon. He will probably leave this to me. Okay. So the seeds in the storehouse consciousness of sentient beings are common to all members of that species, as I'm saying here. So that not only do we construct these things, but because the seeds are common to all of the members of the species, we all kind of imagine that we, through, believing that everybody kind of looks at things the same way, then we have that view that we're correct, we're right. And this just doesn't go to the physical world, but it also has to do with different ideas that we have. So for example, back in the time of Galileo, the storehouse consciousness of the sentient beings, of the members of the church, believed that their view of reality was that the earth was the center and that everything revolved around that, even though science said something completely different. And when Galileo spoke about that, he was not welcomed by that community. He was actually put in prison for it, and then had to recant and say that the church was right in order to get out of jail so he could continue his research. And we see this now in all over the world, where we see different leaders insisting that their way of looking at reality is correct and that other people are wrong. But for the most part, the sentient beings have this common view, but they may argue about the particulars. And there are these three conditions must be met for the alea to sustain a valid cognition of the object. Go on. Okay. So the next slide, 3 kinds of knowing. Now we're beginning to talk about transformation. This is what we're really interested in, is how do we transform this mind? Because we've been told over and over again now that what it is that we're seeing is an illusion. Well, how do we stop that? And so the first introduction of this is through the 3 kinds of knowing transformation. This term is very important. The first knowledge of transformation is by those who have achieved the mastery. Then the next one is followed from those people who have meditative investigation and have transformed themselves. And then the third is that follows from non-discriminating cognition. So we're going to go into more detail about these kinds of things as we go deeper. Because that's what we want to learn, is how do we, you're telling me all this stuff about how we're messed up. How are we going to unmess things up? So now we go to the 3 aspects of the truth of cessation. So we want to stop the mind from having these misunderstandings. And the analysis of this, how suffering occurs in the Yogacara school is based on the principle of what's called the three natures. So the cessation of intrinsic nature, which happens based on the fact that the pervasively fabricated reality that we think that we have is really something that's unproduced. So here cessation means understanding that we have to recognize that this is something that the mind is just producing, and reality is not produced in this way. So then there's the cessation of the two kinds of grasping. One grasping means that we're having this grasper and the thing that we're grasping. So this dualism, that there's a grasper and the thing that you're grasping is this dualism. And in Chung Wei Shalan, we realize that this is a problem. So this issue of subject and object, as I said, is something that's fine points are debated between Dharmapala and Citramati. Please understand that we're not going to go there. When you read the Chung Wei Shalan and you see the 10 different commentators, you see the importance of how this is explained. And Citramati goes into something that I'll talk about in a little while about how we witness and self-witness things to understand the problem of the grasper and the grasped. And the third kind of cessation, which means the original nature of thusness, is something that we need to learn how to do. This is Tathagata. This is our Tathagata. This means that we see things just as they are, and no longer are we superimposing this mistaken view. And that's another meaning of cessation. Okay. Something to go into later. All right. Now back to some basics. This is the theory of seeds. So we have these seeds. Okay. Karmic seeds. So they can be divided in some different ways. One way of dividing them is to look at them from first a natural or inborn seed. This refers to the potentialities which have innately existed before the beginning of time in the momentary actions of consciousness, this vipaka vijnana, which is another way of understanding consciousness. And by the natural forces of things, the Dharma, which engender this Sakya Ayatana Dhatu, which means the aggregates that come together and form the realms. Lots of terminology here. So what this just means, I'll finish the slide and then I'll interpret it. In its regard to these bijas that the Bhagavat, the world honored one, has said in the Askayata Sutra, all sentient beings since the beginning of time have different kinds of dhatus. This is a kind of biju that creates a realm, which are inherent in them, in which, like heaps of microbe, biland grains, exist by their own specific nature. It is to these bijas that the arguments of Chandrapala refer. These bijas are called natural bijas, residing or inherent in basic nature. So what it's basically saying is that we all, by virtue of the fact that we are born into this world, we have these seeds that have been with us since beginningless time. And these seeds from beginningless time are, just kind of part of this torrent that we have inherited. And they're natural and inborn, and we're not concerned at this point in understanding them, other than the fact that they create these realms in the mind. And this then leads to the question that was asked previously about how we just end up gravitating towards certain things, not realizing that these things that we're gravitating to are so can be so troublesome to us, or gravitating to the Dharma as we have today. Okay, so continuing with Dharmapali's commentary, the second type of seed are the bijas whose existence has a beginning. So these come into being as a result in our own particular lifetime, not from before we were born, but now in this lifetime, a result of perfuming. Now, this is a new word that I'm introducing, vasana, by actual dharmas which have been repeated and repeated. They've been repeated since beginningless time, but now they're being repeated in this lifetime. So this is the habitual energy that we have. So these seeds are then perfumed. The perfuming means that the seeds are giving rise to, they're growing, they're affecting the environment around them, because they didn't have the term in ancient times of neural networks, of how networks in the mind and the brain work. And so, how it's said that, that which fires together wires together. So you do the same pattern over and over and over again, and eventually it becomes innate. It becomes something that feels innate, but it's actually something that you have practiced. So a musician who learns a piece of music, at first they have to consciously know where to put their fingers, and then after they practice many times, it just happens automatically. This is part of the habit energy. In the same way, if we do habitual patterns like yelling and screaming at our loved ones, and that becomes our pattern, well, then when something happens that we don't like, it just happens automatically without thinking. Or when we criticize ourselves, or we are very harsh when we make a mistake, it becomes like a habitual pattern, and then that is ingrained. These seeds are created by reason of this perfuming from one level of consciousness to the next. Okay. So, as I'm repeating here, perpetually manifesting like a torrent, we can go to the manas that I've explained in the Mano Vishnaya. These are just repeated here. All right, now we come to the next one, number 4, klishas. So these are the vexing passions that have been referenced before. These are the things that we need to sweep away so that we can see things clearly. Self-delusion, self-belief, self-conceit, and self-love, and that this becomes ingrained in our other omnipresent mental factors of contact, attention, sensation, conception, and volition. I've looked at this before with us. Okay. Now, taking a deep breath, we're now going to try to go deeper into our understanding of alambana. In the seemingly external object, the object appears to have a place or a locality in the receptacle world, in the world that our senses are picking up. Although the consciousness of each sentient being manifests itself in its own distinct manner, yet the result of this manifestation is common. That is to say, the same for all. In other words, the phenomenon of manifested world are each like the other, so that there is no differentiation of external localities. And this is because our sense organs are designed similarly. If I have a sense organ of a cricket and you have the sense organ of an elephant, we're not going to see things the same way, and I will be squished. In the analogy, that is of many lamps being assembled, the illumination which, though separate for each, seems to combine to make a similar illumination. Now, that similar illumination sometimes is used as an explanation for how things go from life to life. But in fact, that's not exactly what's being said here. That's being said that the many lamps are our own similar consciousnesses are joining together, and we're making out of these consciousnesses a common reality that we all agree upon because our sense organs are the same. So this signifies that such objects such as mountains, rivers, are evolving out of a common or universal bija, which belong to the alaya vijnana in common. They are not simply the product of any single consciousness. So we perceive the mountains and rivers. We see them that way. They look that way to us because that's how our perception makes it. And if we looked at things from a different point of view, from the quantum world, we wouldn't be seeing mountains and rivers. We'd be seeing different things. And we'd be studying a whole different Eigenstadt. The internal object, which is twofold, the seeds and the sense faculties and their supporting physical objects. So you end up with an internal object that we create inside the mind, which is made up of the seeds and the sense data that we get. And these seeds are by this means, all the seeds are impure dreams, good, bad, non-defined, etc., which are carried by the Vipaka Vijnana. And these seeds are comprised of the substance of consciousness itself. They are the objects of perception. Alambana. All right. So the object of our perception is this unification of the seed and the senses. So the seed and senses come together and they create this object of perception, which is alambana. But this object of perception is just a mental construct. It's not real. Even though we have to act as if it's real, because then the three truths, we have to have some kind of conventional reality, as we'll see. So back again, we have these moral determinants. I don't want to get back into that, but here we are. Oh yeah, that wouldn't be bad to do that. Okay. So let's just go to the next slide, which has to do with the seeds in the storehouse consciousness. There are 5 types of seeds. There are wholesome seeds, unwholesome seeds, and then there are undefiled, indeterminate, and defiled, indeterminate. And then there is this Buddha nature seed. So we say that all beings have all of these seeds. However, the Buddha nature seed is the most subtle of all of the seeds, and it's very easy for it to be obscured by the other seeds. The other seeds can be very powerful. So for example, if a person has a lot of unwholesome seeds in their mind, this is like having a lot of weeds in your garden, very difficult to grow good fruit. Then if you can get rid of the unwholesome seeds and you can begin to deal with the defiled indeterminants and the undefiled indeterminants, you end up with the wholesome seeds. Then this is a very good thing. And then eventually you don't even need the wholesome seed so much because the Buddha nature seed takes over. So as I like to say, I don't consider it a wholesome seed that I don't have any desire to rob 7-Elevens. 7-Elevens are not on my map to rob. I don't rob banks. I don't rob 7-Elevens. I don't have any urge to do that because the Buddha nature seed has grown enough now that I know Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. Don't cause any harm. If anything, help people. Don't cause them harm. So this is the Buddha nature seed that you don't have to be a Buddhist to have a Buddha nature seed. Everybody has the seed. You can call it whatever you like. So in Buddhism, of course, we call it the Buddha nature seed, but it's not a religious seed. It's a seed that all beings have. Of course, there are people who have debated this and said, oh no, there are certain people who are so bad they don't have a Buddha seed, they've eradicated their Buddha seed. But then there are others who say, no, everybody has it. Look at the story of the Buddha and the murderer, whose name I never pronounced correctly, who cut off people, killed people, and then took their thumbs and made them into a necklace. What is his name? I forget how to pronounce it.
Angulimala.
Oh, very good. We have a chorus, of course. Say it again.
Had a lot of lessons.
Oh, very good. So so we say, even if he could become enlightened, or at least become a monk and eventually become an arahat in his next life, we can say everybody has a Buddha seed. So when we look at people from the Buddha nature point of view, the Bodhisattva is the person who sees the Buddha nature in everybody. When he looks at people, he sees all beings, no matter who they are, as beings who have the potential to become enlightened. So they don't look at them critically and with anger or hatred. They don't have to return a blow with a blow. They know this person is maybe just more distorted, more confused, more distressed. We want to help that person out. We don't want to cause them more difficulty. So this term, the conspecific seeds, I've already talked about this, about how all members of a certain species see things the same way, they have the same senses, and therefore the certain individual seeds are inherited as a result of that karma accumulated from the past life. So all of us as human beings, we've done something wonderful to become human beings. In the Tibetan tradition, they have this legend about how it is that there's a turtle in the big ocean, and the turtle pops his head up once every 100 years or something like that. And if his head tends to come up in the middle of a donut floating in the ocean and the head goes all the way through, then that person is born as a human. In the Jewish tradition, it's a bagel. So it's not so easy to get born as a human. So all of us who are humans, we have this Buddha nature, we have this potential to become a Buddha. All beings have this potential, all sentient beings. It's just that humans, we're closer. So I have here Joshu's dog here. So why do dogs love us? Because they feel sorry for us. Their sense of smell is over 10,000 times better than ours. They feel badly that we cannot detect the true nature of things by their smell. The sense of smell is least mediated by all the senses. It goes directly from our nose into the olfactory bulb right away. But ours is, we've lost our good sense because of the eyes have become so strong. But perhaps if we could smell each other better, we could stop a great deal of anger and violence in the world. Who knows? I've stopped short of being more graphic with that. So I hope that people appreciate this. So perfuming, vasana, means that we, in this way, the seeds from the eighth consciousness influence each other through the levels and vice versa, and it does it through this sense of perfuming, which is a kind of smelling. I'm going to diverge for just a moment to tell a little story about myself and my son, Jay. We went to the San Diego Zoo. I don't know if you know the San Diego Zoo. It's really wonderful. We have a great zoo here also. but to go to the San Diego Zoo costs $90 a person. At the gate, I met with the fellow at the gate and I said, oh, when you come to St. Louis, I will get you into our zoo for free. He said, oh, you must be a very important person. I said, no, we're all important people in St. Louis. Everybody gets to go for free to the zoo. But at the San Diego Zoo, they have an enclosure for koalas. And I listened to a lecture by one of the zookeepers there, very knowledgeable. He said that the koala bear has a sac in the middle of their chest. And this sac, particularly in the males, emanates a particular odor. And that odor is interpreted by the females. The females know all the whole entire history of the person's background. It's like doing a Facebook check, I guess, on the person. You can tell whether or not the person has good genetics, whether they've been eating healthy, whether they have the right state of mind, how old they are, what kind of health problems they might have. All of that information is contained in the chest of this gland of the koala. And so the female koalas go around and they're looking for the mate, and they're looking for the koala has a very good gland that gives them good information. We could learn a lot from these wonderful species. Okay, so this is Vasana. So now going to the next slide, another picture of our consciousnesses. This is actually the chapter that I read from the Vijnapti Matrata. When I read that page, that one paragraph is going into this particular understanding of how there's an image and then the Mati Bhaga, and then there is this perception, the Darsana Bhaga. And these two things, they look like that they're real, they look like they're separate, but they give the illusion. One gives the illusion that there are objects out there that are substantial and real, and this is the way things are in phenomenon, and this is how they exist. And the other one gives the perception that our self is real, and that this is how we exist. But then as we have an understanding of things, we penetrate through this alambana and we see things more clearly. We begin to realize that this is just something that we have constructed. Not just us, but all of beings have constructed this because they haven't fully realized things. Now, all right, so this is in the Chung Wei Shalon, they talk about 4 levels of how we see things. The first is the mind perceiving the world. Then we see the mind perceiving the world. We call this a mindfulness practice. The mind perceiving the world. So if we're sitting in meditation and it's just the mind looking at the world, we're not having much insight there, not much vipassana. We're still stuck in the mind perceiving the world. I'm sitting in meditation, I'm worrying about this and about that, and what's going to happen, how long is COVID going to last, what am I going to do tomorrow, what kinds of things am I upset about with this person saying this and that. This is still the mind perceiving the world. But then when we sit long enough, we calm the mind down in shamatha, we are able to see that the mind is creating this. And so we see the mind perceiving itself and how the mind perceives the world. And then at the next level of the mind perceiving the mind, we begin to have this idea of a witness. We begin to see that there's like a supervisor in there that can say, oh, I can actually learn to control this mind. My mind has the capacity to say to my mind, oh, you don't have to think about this. You can just calm the mind down more. Or you can look at these certain principles and understand how they work. And then finally, we have this supervisor of the supervisor. The mind perceiving the mind, perceiving the mind, perceiving the world. So we can actually do that. So we can see this understanding of how it is that in the original teachings of the Buddha, that the Buddha talks about how in the Dhammapada is the mind actually exists before the mind exists before experiences. This is the supervisor of the supervisor, and how it then is ruled by the mind. This is like the director of the movie, and then how it is that we become the actor in the movie. So then the mind acts in the world we created. This is a very profound understanding. I hope that I'm just making it clear here as we move forward the next 5 minutes. So the ripening, the maturing of the seeds, this vipaka, this is the vipaka vijnana, is the ripening of the seeds of the consciousness. And then you can ripen the seeds that make things more confusing and more troublesome, or you can recognize, oh, I'm making this big mistake. I don't want to go in that direction. I want to ripen the seeds of transformation, not the seeds of troublesomeness. And then we can begin to recognize the importance of equanimity, of learning how to quiet the mind down, how to make the mind less troublesome. So this is the process that the mind goes through. How the in upekkha, in equanimity, this is the first, the negation of calming the mind down without become lax. Learning how to calm the mind without falling asleep. And learning how to pay attention to the mind without becoming excited, which leads to the wisdom, and to be able to enter into the jhana states. And on the other level, we can begin this process. We go into shamatha and vipassana that leads to insight. On the more mundane side, the super mundane side, we can practice wisdom. Okay, so this practice of metta, karuna, mudita is connected to our sense of equanimity that leads to this kind of wisdom. Okay. Let me see if I can quickly go through some stuff here. Turning about. Maybe this is a good place to take a break, and I just have to let go of my attachment to going through all the different levels of the training here today. If I do a good enough job, I won't have to come back. I can leave this world. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back on time. I realize that as the time goes by and people have been sitting for so many hours patiently, as we go further, the material gets deeper and deeper, and our energy becomes less and less able to take things in. So this is unfortunate. This is part of the torrent as we get closer, as we go deeper and deeper into this material. So I'm going to try to encapsulate it the best I can. So let's go to the second slide on equanimity if we can.
John, can I ask you a question
Please.
before
Sure.
you continue?
Okay.
Okay, you talk about the bija and then the Buddha nature, you know, the picture there with the
Right.
Buddha nature in the
Yes.
middle. And then now, does Chen Wei Shi Lun talking about the five, what do you call it? Let me see. The five catalog of beings in 成唯识论 or not?
Yes.
Because with the Bija nature, with the Buddha nature, there is actually one class or one caste that do not have that.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. But this controversy, you know, is something that we need to dispel, because in fact, all beings are capable of doing this no matter what. And I'm not sure if the Chung Wei Shalun discusses the Ichitanka beings, but we know that there are certain teachers along the way in Chan who went through this transformation of trying to help people to understand that all beings, no matter what, are capable of attaining their Buddha nature.
okay, because it's the same work of, I don't see it in the 30 verses actually.
It's not in there, and it's not in the, I don't think it's in the Chung Wei Shalun. Yeah, I don't think so.
So, yeah, 成唯识论, because it's like stick to the 30 verses, but same work of Vasubandhu is a little bit of controversial, because on the 20 verses, it actually specify those five groups of people. So
Yes.
it's not, yeah, it's not on the 30 verses then. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Got it. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah,
John,
that is a piece of concern for the imagery of the 20 verses, because the imagery in there is talking about the people who are in the prison, and then there are the prison guards, and then there are the prisoners. So they use that imagery a lot. And the question is whether there are certain prisoners who should never be out of the prison. So yes, so this is a big always a big controversy in the 20 verses.
Right.
Right.
Right, because you know it's the same work of Vasubandhu, but you know we can see the way from Abhidhamma till the 20, then now the 30. It's we can see, you know, the developmental thought or philosophy of Vasubandhu then.
Right. That's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And the commentators who came afterwards, Dharmapala and others as well. Yes. All right.
John, I was going to ask real quick. This is in a nutshell, since this is such a common thing for meditators, scholars, and just lay people and just people in general. Do you have a definition between like mind and consciousness? How would you explain like the similarities and differences? Or
Okay. So the mind is made up of different mental factors, and these mental factors are important in terms of the development of this mind consciousness. The mind consciousness is also the mind has this consciousness element in it, in the mind, and the consciousness are the consciousness is the way that the mind knows things. It's the way that the mind understands and knows. So it has sentience to it in that regard. We don't say that rocks have sentience, but they are the product of consciousness as well. But the sentient consciousness is what we're interested in here, is the mind's nature, and the mind's nature to do many things. So one of the parts of the mind's nature is to know things. And that consciousness is really what develops into this ability to transform, how we can transform our mind. So we can say that the consciousness has this quality. This is the Vijnapti Matrata. This is the ability that the consciousness has to transform itself.
thank you, Don.
Yeah, I hope that helps. It's you know, they're very closely interconnected. Yeah.
Could we say that the mind is physical and the consciousness is mental? Or is that incorrect?
Yeah,
Go,
yeah. The
Your
brain, the
brain,
the brain is physical,
yes.
but the mind is the way that is our system of how things work. It's just the functioning. So the mind is functioning, but the consciousness has this quality of saying it wants to transform. It wants us to transform to stop suffering. The mind doesn't have that. The mind doesn't have that all by itself. It has to have consciousness or sentience or awareness to do that. Maybe is Venerable Kuan Yin in the room today? We can grab her near the end. She can come in and she can give her explanation. Or if Master is around, he can give. We can get somebody. Maybe near the end, Jade can grab them and say, "Come to the room for this question. This is a good question." Okay. All right. So Upekkha. Now we're talking about using this Upekkha, the sense of equanimity, to actually turn about. This is Parvriti. Or Juan, this is this turning about of our consciousness through this use of calming and insight, and we can encourage the synthesis. And that's what we're trying to do in the Bodhisattva practice. We want to unify these things through and combined with you, Pekka, to be able to bring us to some wisdom. We want to turn the mind about. Is Jade still around, by the way? Is she here?
She's in the room.
She's in the room. So Jade, I'm going to ask you if you know the answer to a question that I have that has to do with, as we move forward, this turning about. If we go to the next the next slide. So the turning about, there is the verses that are on the Guanyin Pavilion. And I'm curious if you know who the author of those verses might be, because I've looked everywhere and I haven't been able to find it, but I know that it's quoted in many other places. So if she has the answer to that, or she looks into that, it's fine. The next slide I'm going to skip over, because this is the different kinds of ways of describing this attainment of the transformation, samapati, and you can look at that if you like on your own. But we're going to go to slides number 5. Okay. Let's see. Slide 5. Okay. So now we're talking more about transformation. And I want to explain how transformation can happen through our greater awareness of what's called the 2 truths and the 3 natures. So it's through this practice of the 2 truths and the 3 natures that we begin to eliminate the cognitive distortions that exist in the mind from beginningless time. So if we go to the 3rd slide where it says Yogacara view of reality, I'm going to present to you the overview of everything here. The Yogacara view of reality will come up because I know Francesca has a good overview of all of the slides.
Probably the next slide set, or I'm not finding it.
Number 5? You don't have 5?
Yes. File number 5?
Yeah, file number 5.
File number 5. Yeah.
The 3rd slide is called the Yogacara view of reality.
There we are.
Okay, very good. So I knew that at this point in the presentation that we would all be getting to a state of exhaustion. So I wanted to give you an overview of the entire theory. Okay, so we've been talking about the 8 consciousnesses, and the transformation is what's really important. So the 3 nature theory and the 2 truths theory, this comes together, and brings rise to the 5 stages of cultivation on one side and the 3 kayas, or the bodies of reality, on the other side. And this leads then to bodhisattva bhumis from the upeka that we were just talking about, equanimity, and then on the other side, the basis of reality, these 4 conditions, including alambana, that then lead to the turning about and the transformation of consciousness. So this is really the whole story here. I have Bodhidharma sitting here, but this is the whole story. Bodhidharma would agree. Okay, so I wanted to give this overview. So now, if you have an understanding of the 8 consciousnesses, this is great. So the other stuff that I'm just talking about here is really what evolves from this Yogacara view of reality. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here. And if I go into all of this stuff and it becomes overwhelming, then you'll lose sight of what's really important. So I just want to make sure that we are very kind to ourselves here as we go through this. Okay. So the 2 truths. So the true truths actually are connected to the 2 truths of Nagarjuna and expanded in Yogacara to be called the 4 levels of the 2 truths. So in the original Nagarjuna, it was just the 2 truths. The 2 truths are, there's a conventional reality, and then there is this ultimate reality. And in Nagarjuna's view, the ultimate reality, the transformation of the mind from the conventional reality to the ultimate reality, is actually through an understanding of dependent origination. And we're going to see how important that becomes in the 3 natures. But here, in this particular, the 4 levels of the 2 truths is the classification of truth in 8 parts. And the system is based on the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, which discusses 4 secular aspects of the truth and 1 ultimate aspect of the truth. But the other system in the Chung Wei Shalun discusses 4 ultimate aspects and only 1 secular aspect. So they both have different views of the same thing, but they're looking at it from different points of view. Okay. So here is the conventional and ultimate truth. So this is actually right out of Nagarjuna. So Yogacara and Chung Wei Shalun define this a little bit better. And if you really want to get into this, I've left you the slides for it, that you can see that the 1 conventional truth in the Chung Wei Shalun is the first one. Mundane conventional truth, the truth that everyday objects are like water pitchers, tables, houses do not actually exist, but ordinary people believe that they exist to the provisional names given to them. And then there are some additional ones. In the ultimate truth, in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, only the last one is considered the ultimate one, but all 4 of these are considered to be true. For our purposes, just let's look at the last one, called the ultimate truth. The truth that the true nature of the Dharmadhatu, the realm of phenomenon, cannot be described by words or thoughts, and that the absolute truth can only be realized by supreme, undiscriminating cognition of the advanced disciples. All right, so you can see where Zen comes from here in terms of beyond words, beyond books, the expression in the Gung-an of the full interpretation of the riddle or the puzzle has to be from deep within the person and can't be expressed in words. So this is the ultimate truth. But you can see that there are some other aspects here. And again, because of time, if I start going into more and more levels of detail, the big picture will be lost. So now the 3 natures. So the 3 natures, again, are going to look very close we like the teachings of Nagarjuna. So here we have the imagined or illusion nature that exists where where it looks like it really exists, but it actually doesn't. The Paratantra level, which is dependent origination, and then the perfected knowledge, where we can see into the true nature of things and see how all things are empty. So these are the three, as you can see how closely parallel these are to each other. So in Madhyamaka and Yogacara, the three nature theories are very similar. And I go into this and I give you some examples. The most notable example are the snake rope hemp example. That's the easiest to understand. So a person's walking along a mountain road at dusk and they see something curled up by a rock. And the person with the poor eyesight, they imagine that this rope made of hemp is really a snake. And they believe this illusion and they become frightened and they have an emotional reaction to it. And they may even behave. They may try to kick it or knock it away, hit it with a stick, and then they realize that it's just a rope. So the dependent origination metaphor that's used is the clay that conceals the gold ore. And again, this is a very well-known story about how inside there's gold ore, but on the outside there's clay. And you have to burn away the clay in order to be able to find what's really going on the inside. And the inside is really the 12 links of dependent origination, etc. And then the highest one is the perfected consummate knowledge, which is recognizing that our consciousness is like a magic show and how this magic show is created by the mind. So for those people who really study deeply the original suttas, they will know that in the Fena Sutta, the Buddha talks about the aggregates being illusions, and that form is like a foam, and that feelings are like bubbles, and that our mind consciousness, they have a metaphor for that escapes me, but then there's also the mental formations, which are like a husk of a banana tree. When you open it up, it's empty on the inside, and consciousness is like a magic show. So all of these are, Sherry, do you remember what the metaphor is for the thought process, for perception?
A bubble
I'm sorry?
on a street.
The bubble? So what is feeling? If I thought feeling was the bubble.
Missing a mirage.
Oh, mirage. Mirage is the perception. That's right. Very good. Yeah, the mirage is the perception. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So all of these things are connected to the original teachings of the Buddha. So becoming familiar with that is very helpful. Good memory circuitry there. Yeah. So we can go, I've left you a lot of slides on the three natures. There's a lot of material here to understand the importance of the three natures. And this is good because I have a lot of words on these slides. And if I go into the words on these slides too much, we're all going to get involved in too many words. And we know that enlightenment happens without the words. So let's go to the slide that says Yogacara, a view of how reality is created and generated. So the first step is through our cognitions. We always are projecting some kind of imagination. And then the next step is the projection of this false imagination changes or contaminates the world, thinking the imagined world to be the real world. And then the next level, people become attached to this imagined world, and that this attachment gives rise to all forms of suffering. Yeah, so this is how reality and the suffering of reality is generated. So when we see the world clearly, we see that really, just like the mind is made up of these three different parts, the aleya, the manas, and the mano, there are also three realms that are created in the awareness of a Buddha. A Buddha sees things from a completely different point of view. So in the Dharmakaya, this is the highest level of the Buddha nature, then the truth body emerges. And so you see the principles of enlightenment and you know how to transform yourself, and there's no limit. In the next level, there's the Sambhogakaya. So in the Sambhogakaya, there's this blissfulness that arises because the person becomes aware that this reality that we're experiencing is in fact an illusion. And so what they can do is to devote themselves as bodhisattvas to be of benefit to the world. And then when they do that, their expression in the first bhumi is pramudita, this great bliss of joyfulness comes over the person because they don't have to worry about their own suffering anymore. They're only happy helping others. And then at the other level is the manifestation of the Buddha in the human form, the Nirmanakaya. So this is that we can see that there's actually beings who are capable of attaining this in their lifetime, and they can be great teachers and helpers to all beings, and not be subject to suffering and time and space. So these are the three levels of the three kayas in a short form. There's a lot here. Okay. So now we're interested in talking about the bottom of this circle, which is called the transformation of the basis. And this transformation of the basis is, Sherry's got popped up here, so I don't know if you had a comment that you wanted to make, Sherry. Okay, so this is, maybe we lost our slides, but the transformation of the basis, again, this of course is the name of the book that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote. The kind he calls Transformation of the Base, Ashreya. So this Ashreya is dependence, continuity, sometimes vicinity or connection or basis, and Parvriti. This is this turning about or transformation. The turning about or transformation is the revolution that occurs within our consciousness to try to, or actually to accomplish, looking at the world from a different point of view so that we're not stuck in this world of suffering. So each one of the consciousnesses are transformed. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail here. So Ashreya is divided into lots of different parts, and I'm not going to go into this because it is something that's beyond our scope here. And so I'm just going to let you know that this turning about at the very bottom is from the first bhumi to the 8th bhumi or 7th bhumi, and then we'll be talking about this in a moment here. So here's another chart that connects the three kayas to the four wisdoms of the transformation. There's different levels of transformation, and then the 8 consciousnesses and how they're interconnected with each other. So this is what I'm going to be talking about for our remaining moments here. So this is too deep. 6 states of transmutation. This is
Sorry, Fran got disconnected. She's coming right back.
Oh no. All right. Okay. So that's even better. I'll just stay on here for just a minute. Yeah. All right. There she is. I am Francesca. I am at a chart that has the 3 bodies, and I have on the right side in blue, the 8 Vijnanas, the 8 consciousnesses. There you go. Okay. So we can see that what we want to do is we want to transform ourselves from this conventional view of being linked to the sense spaces, and we want to revolutionize all of our consciousness. We want to revolutionize the way we see things, how we discriminate them, how we define the self, and how we get beyond this ego self, and eventually understanding the true nature of the Alaya Vijnana, and be able to attain these 4 levels of wisdom that then allow us to transform the body of our experience into these different levels. Okay. And then the next slide with the 6 states of transmutation, which I think we're going to get into too many weeds here. So I'm going to go past all of this because it's just so much. So let's go to the bhumis. Okay. So when the bodhisattva begins to this transformation, on the right-hand side, you see the 12 bhumis that are described in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, and it contains 2 pre-bhumi stages. So when a person takes the bodhisattva vows, they don't immediately jump to the first bhumi. They have to prepare themselves. And how they prepare themselves is to really refine their aspiration to become a bodhisattva, and to eliminate as much as they can, the hindrances that get in the way of them being able to to follow the bodhisattva path. And the next is the investigation pathway, where they become familiar with the teachings about what it is to be a bodhisattva. So they learn about the paramitas, they learn about the Lotus Sutra, they become exposed to the Flower Ornament Sutra, they become exposed to the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. They may not understand it all, but they realize, oh, this is part of the path. These are the training methods that I'm going to have to use. So they begin to understand that. And once they practice this in coordination with their meditation practice, we hope that what will happen is this blossoming of this bliss, this state of highest joyfulness that comes as a result of letting go of the ego self and being involved in the pathway to enlightenment through the bodhisattva path. And this is comparable to the levels in the jhanas. But in the jhanas, usually this is something that occurs when a person is in the meditative state. But the bodhisattva, they're not satisfied with just being able to attain this in meditation. They have to be able to do it in the conventional world, to bring this teaching back to the conventional world to be of benefit to all beings. So we have the 12 bhumis here and the 10 bhumis in the original. I'm not going to go through all of these different stages because there's a lot here, but I have left them for you. And then a more in detail description of the ground or the bhumi and how each one of them are developed. Notice that the word for pramudita means higher altruistic joy, the joyfulness from coming to being of helpful to all beings. And the second ground is vimala, like in Vimala Kirti, which means purification. So it's another level of purification. This is really the purification from the hindrances, both sets of hindrances, particularly in this case, the hindrance of the self-view, living being view, etc. And the ground, and from this, then there's this, the other stages that develop. I'm not going to go into that. But I have given to you something here, which I've worked on for many years. Anyone who wants to make a large donation to MABA because of this chart is welcome to do that. This is the result of many years of practice and being able to put into one piece of paper all 52 of the Bodhisattva stages. So now that I've given this to you, hopefully you'll be able to do it in short form, because otherwise it's so long. You feel like, oh, how can I do 52 stages? All right. So the first stage of this transmutation is this ability to break through and have increasing energy. So when you know you're making this transformation, you can recognize it because your energy level becomes much better. You no longer have so many leaks where your energy is so affected by the outside world and all your energy leaks out. You know, the Chinese character Lo, I'll talk about how it's a picture of a house with the roof leaking and it's raining indoors. This is we learn how to transform the breaking this, and we break through. Again, this term breaking through the barrier, which is found in the Brahma Vihara, but mostly described in Upekkha, which is equanimity, the importance of breaking through the barrier. And then we get this increased energy. And we begin to understand how these practices all fit together. We can see how we can have these insights into stages of cultivation, how these stages connect to the 37 prerequisites of enlightenment in the original suttas, and how this is also connected to meditation practice. So we begin to see, oh, there's no separation. All of these things are interconnected with each other, and this will help us break through the barrier. And we can then enter into the stage of seeing. And then eventually we can break through perfect completion, and we get to the effectiveness of that. And then we can go, there are different times. So sometimes we get caught up and we can end up in inferior transmutation, but then other times we can go forward and we can get the great transformation take place. So we're not just satisfied with the inferior version. So this is just something that we can get to. Now, the wisdom of the transformed 8 consciousnesses, this is where we've been headed, is to this chart right here. So if we ended right here, we would be satisfied, because this is the culmination point of how we have a wisdom where we can transform. And I do this a little bit from the bottom up. So we start with the transformation of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. We understand that all of these things are in fact illusions. This doesn't mean that we don't have kusala or wholesomeness. Indeed, we have to have wholesomeness in order to give rise to this consciousness. The bodhisattva consciousness is in fact permeated with wholesomeness. So it's not like we can say, oh, I can do whatever I want. No, it's not that at all. It's that we have this activity that takes place that's unrestricted in this consciousness, because we have unlimited energy to be of benefit, and we don't become exhausted, tired, or overwhelmed, because we continue to practice without any restriction. We know that we can continue no matter what the obstacle is, we continue to practice. And so that transforms our 5 sense spaces. Then in the next stage, we enter I'm looking at this the blue ones here. Blue, yes, there we are. Yes. And then the next level, the discriminating mind, is transformed. So now we're getting much better sense data. We realize that it is an illusion, and it's just something that has been part of our bijas, our collective bijas, and we don't have to attach to it. And this leads us to what's called wondrous observing cognition. This is the joyfulness that takes place in the first bhumi. And this transformation of the mano-vijnana takes place, and the person has joyfulness in whatever it is that they're experiencing, even into death, no problem. And then the upekkha is transformed into this cognition of equality in nature. If Venerable was here, she would give more information about how upekkha is transformed into this equality of nature, where we see all beings as equal in nature, and we don't make distinctions between I like this person, I don't like this person's right, this person's wrong. We don't make those kind of distinctions. We have loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity for all beings. And this also then transforms the seventh consciousness, the manas, and we realize that our own self is in fact an illusion. And we no longer favor this illusory self over others, which then leads to the transformation of the storehouse consciousness, which is called great mirror cognition. I can't say much about this, but other than that the eighth consciousness is purified and the alaya vijnana is the great mirror becomes purified, and even the bodhisattva seed itself becomes optional. Okay, wow. Huh. let's recognize that we can these subjective transformations, we can let that go as well. All right. So now let's just take a minute and collect ourselves and see if there are any comments that people want to make about these kind of transformations. Are you ready to transform yourself? And Jade, do you know the source of the poem from Maba? I wish that I had that poem here in front of me. I thought that I put it in my slides, but apparently not. Francesca, you went through the slides. I don't think I have the slide in there about that, so I can't share that with people. But when you go to the Bodhisattva Guan Yin and you see those two plaques there, you'll see that says if you can turn yourself around by yourself, why do you need my great loving kindness and compassion? So Bodhisattva Guan Yin realizes that we need the great loving kindness and compassion to be able to turn ourselves around. And this turning ourselves around is the transformation of the base, the transformation of these eight consciousnesses. Is everybody still with us here?
I have a question. Can you please repeat that the Bodhisattva's C could be optional?
Yes. So we know that when the Buddha passes away, as the Buddha, he no longer has any more karma, no more seeds. So therefore, he is able to leave the world and there is no more return to the world. This is the original teachings of the Buddha. But the Bodhisattva has the option of being able to return to the world. How is that possible? Because all of the seeds have been eradicated except the one seed, which is the Buddha nature seed. So all of the wholesome and unwholesome, the indeterminate seeds, those seeds have been transformed. And then the bodhisattva seed, larger and larger, the bodhisattva seed is the full bija. So at that moment, the bodhisattva at the certain level, I think the 8th level, 7th or 8th level, will no longer fall back into the conventional reality, can't fall back. At that moment, the bodhisattva has the choice. Do I return to the world to continue to be a benefit, or do I enter into being parinibbana? So that's the choice. So the Dalai Lama, for example, has said, I'm not sure if I'm going to come back. So this may be skillful means in order to throw off the Chinese government, because the Chinese government wants to capture the Dalai Lama, and so he doesn't have any influence. They've already captured the Panchen Lama. They won't want him to have any influence. The Karmapa is there in India in training. So after the passing away of the Dalai Lama, the Panchen Lama will not be able to take over. And we don't know whether or not there'll be a new Dalai Lama. So instead, the Karmapa will take over. This is in the Tibetan tradition. So it just is an example of the Bodhisattva. In the Chinese tradition, we don't have a Dalai Lama, but we have the Bodhisattvas. And the Bodhisattvas also have that determination that they can make. This is my understanding. Kathy, do you want to shed some light on this? Is this your understanding as well?
Actually, I was searching for, the verses on the Guanyin, the two pairs. There is no author.
There's no author. I know that fellow.
But then this is actually taken from a temple in what they call a temple called South Sea Guanyin Temple.
Oh, okay.
So it's exactly the same,
where is this temple? Can we go visit it?
Well, actually, I visited that. It's in Fujian.
Fujian. Oh, very good. If you can send me a little link to it, that would be great. I'd like to. Okay. I'd like to see it. Is there a picture of the temple?
Did I take a picture when I was there? Oh, I
maybe,
forgot.
Maybe in the internet, is there a picture of the temple?
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
Okay, so if you send me a link later, that would be great.
Okay. Okay.
That's my tuition charge.
Sure. That's too little for you as a professor. We can't afford you.
That's okay. So the question that was asked was the question of why it is that the Buddha eradicates all of his seeds and the Bodhisattva has the option of keeping the Buddha nature seeds to come back in the next life or to enter into Buddhahood. So that was the question that was asked. And I was checking with you to make sure that that was your understanding as well.
Yeah, that's my understanding also. But, there are different levels. That is why, some of them are called Bodhisattva, some of them are, the Buddha is the Buddha.
Yes.
Okay. Especially the consciousness of, well, the Buddha doesn't have any kind of, it's only wisdom, not consciousness anymore, because, the turnaround, the transcendent. So, but then to the Bodhisattvas, they still have beings to be savage.
Yes.
So the level of equanimity is different.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I
and
hope that answered your question a little bit. In all of our minds, as we're studying, there's always other levels that we don't understand. So we have the same questions because we don't know what's going on at that level. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I did
Thank
have
you.
a comment. Can you guys hear me?
Sure.
Or question comment. So being at that karma is infinite, from my understanding and that what I'd studied, I always thought that it wasn't necessarily that an enlightened being's karma is extinguished as much as when karma comes to fruition, it doesn't actually have an effect on them. Like when the Buddha was enlightened and Devadatta rolled the boulder down at him and that rock pierced his foot, that was his karma for that to happen. But it wasn't that the Buddha now exists as an exalted being in a physical body where nothing happens. Like even thoughts arise, but they don't affect him. And if you look at thoughts as being karma, I always just thought that it was that when that karma came to being, it was like burnt up, but it's not like the entire storehouse of karmic effects just vanished in an instant. So otherwise, how would he exist with things happening to him and people talking to him? So
Yeah, these are very good points that you're bringing up, and I am not qualified to say exactly how all of that happens. All I can say is from my own experience, certainly I observe and can be the subject of unwholesome karma, and it may affect me, but it doesn't mean that I contain the unwholesome karma. So for example, if I'm walking down the street and somebody comes up and robs me, that may be related to that person's karma is doing that. I may be the subject of that, but how I respond to it, my alambana, how I respond to that, how I perceive that person may be different than, a person who becomes frightened or angry or, hateful or something along those lines. So the response internally of that is really related to whether or not I have the unwholesome karma. So if I don't have the unwholesome karma, then I don't respond in a negative way to the person putting the gun to me.
yeah, I think it's just interesting too, because your response to it is karma, but that happening to you was karma. So you being an enlightened being, there would still be the situation that allowed that to arise and happen to you, but then there's the karma in your
the idea that situations are something that we allow to happen needs a little bit more investigation. So just because we experience something doesn't mean that we have the karma to allow it to happen on an individual basis. It's not an individual kind of karma that causes us to be robbed or to have the boulder fall down on us. This is the result of the other person's karma, their actions. But through our reception of that is part of the collective understanding of how it is that beings experience things, and how we respond to it is what matters. That's really the karma, is how it is the karma vipaka connection is how we respond to it.
So in general, then it would be things just happen, period, and then purely only your response to what happened is what karma would be in this definition.
Yeah, the karma is created by the intentional action, the choice.
Yeah, karma with intention.
That's right. So experiences are part of the collective experiences that we have as human beings. We all have, aging, sickness, death, difficulties arise, but how the mind responds to it, that's what it is that's related to the development or transformation of the internal seeds. So we don't have to take responsibility for the bad stuff that happens that we may be caught up in. We can just take responsibility for how we respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. So after Katrina, there were people who were interviewed because their houses were destroyed, and there were these two nice ladies that lived right next to each other. And the one lady, her house was destroyed. She was tearful and crying and upset, and she was inconsolable. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. My life is over. I don't know what to do. Very, very distraught. And the lady next door, her house equally destroyed. And they interviewed her and she says, well, this is very hard on so many of my neighbors, so hard on the people of New Orleans and everybody who's been affected by this, even all the way to Mississippi. I will find my way to be able to rebuild. And I remember that lady because she showed up again a few months later on the news. She was in Florida. She had rebuilt her life and built a new house. And in Florida, they had another hurricane. Hurricane Wilma came by and destroyed her house a second time. And they interviewed her and said, oh, you're the lady from Katrina. And I said, oh, yes, yes. I know your house has been destroyed again. She said, oh, very difficult for all of the people here throughout this entire area. Very, very hard. I'll just find a way to rebuild. And my wife looked at this and she says, I really admire this person. This is a great person. I just hope she doesn't move into our neighborhood. So this is an
everyone
example.
remembers,
What's that?
we discussed a lot of this in one of our other classes where we talked about the niyamas,
Okay.
all the orders. There's the physical order, like weather and hurricanes and things like that. Those are just due to the laws of the physical world, and it's not your karma. Similar that there are laws of living matter and the laws of the Dhamma, and then there were a couple of others. But we talked about how that's not your karma if a hurricane hits you, per se. It's just...
Yeah, a hurricane, but like if it were an individual person, like Don's example of like somebody robbing you, would that not be potentially from infinite lifetimes at some point the reaction to some sort of action with intention you had made leading to that happening lifetimes later?
Right. To come back to the lady whose houses kept being destroyed, it's her intentional action to keep building houses near the coast. So that is her karmic action. She keeps building houses even though she knows that hurricanes are going to keep coming. So that is her karmic aspect to it. The hurricane is not hitting her because she's a bad person or because her house is there. So
yeah, and if she were an enlightened being and she built a house there, she would then have karma because it was her karma to build something, even though she's an enlightened being that has, you know, karma doesn't have to take effect on.
We would have to assume that if an enlightened being is building a house there, they're doing it because they're going to help the people who are going to be harmed by the hurricane. He wants to be there, like the masters who are hoping to be born in a hell realm so that they can help the people in hell. It's not that they're a horrible person, they're going to help someone. So when someone is an enlightened being, they're not having bad things happen because they're bad. They're going into that situation for reasons of their own to help people.
Yeah, like an action with intention. I think my point more being that they're utilizing karma and karma is happening to them even though they are enlightened.
But it's a good intention, not an intention.
Yeah, but karma nonetheless still.
So one of the things that I heard from a very good bodhisattva some years ago when I was talking to him about this is that he said to me, be careful because unless you're an enlightened being, you don't really understand karma.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're all talking about it. Right?
The other aspect that we're leaving out is that karma is self-centered action. And a Buddha does not have self-centered action. We talked a lot about the turning about and having the self-view, the self-conceit, and so on, the self-identification. An enlightened being does not have those. So any action he takes does not have that self-centered intention.
But a bodhisattva keeps the one ultimate attachment so they continue to come back. So would that, by definition, mean that has to be a self-centered action for them to want to help others? Otherwise, they would cross the shore, right, and not have any karma to come back.
But that's actually something that different schools can argue about at times, whether there's
maybe
there's an enlightened being manifesting.
Maybe we can look at it this way. Karma is more attributed to involuntary. You know, it's an energy that you are pushed into it. But then, you know, for the Bodhisattva, whose action is not involuntary, their action is not called karma, it's called vow. So there is a difference. So if I intentionally, I make a vow and say that, you know, I'm going to salvage people and I'm going to build a house next to, you know, some people who are in danger. So that's their vow. So the energy is different. One is, you know, involuntary. You're pushed, you are driven by this kind of karmic energy. The other, you know, on the other hand, the bodhisattvas, they make a vow, and that kind of vow is creating another type of energy. So if that, you know, would answer your question.
Yeah, and I guess all that's at the conceptual level, right?
Right.
Don's point's really important that this is one of the imponderables. It reminds me to go back to Bhante's teaching on karma in general, but this is specific question to Bodhisattva path. And even those vows, though, they were set by some intentional action at one point by somebody, right? So that might factor into it too. It's just so complex and multi-layered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the vows are not karmic energy. It's different.
They are not
Even
self-centered.
though there is intention, but you know, the intention is completely different. It's just like there are 14 questions that the Buddha won't answer. Remember, it's irrelevant. So one of the question is that, you know, after the Buddha entered the nirvana, is he still in to salvage people? Where is he? So that's one of the questions that, you know, we maybe.
That's the other thing I wanted to say from yesterday. It's that will I exist? Won't I exist? Will I both exist or not exist? Will I neither exist nor not exist? Those things don't apply with enlightenment.
Yeah.
You guys are all very smart. Very good.
But are we wise?
Can I add something to the manas on number 7 on your slide? That the upekkha, cognition of equanimity. Okay. As far as I understand, this manas react to the alaya, which is the 8th consciousness, claiming that there is a self who is directly controlling. So when we transcended from the mana consciousness into the upekkha nature, that means, you know, this person is not claiming that there is a self anymore. So he or she can perceive that, you know, all beings are being equal. So that is the kind of consciousness or wisdom. It's not conscious anymore of upekkha. That's what I understand.
Right, and actually upekkha itself is transformed into the equality of all beings, which is different than the word upekkha. It's a different term. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
The whole process of moving through the bhumis, the process of developing. You don't enter into the first bhumi until you've had your first experience of no self, and then you continue to perfect that until you come to the level of perfecting equanimity, and then as Caddy said, going on.
So I think it's very important to realize that when we when we teach our children about Santa Claus, for example, we take joy in the fact that the child will believe that Santa Claus exists, and we give presents to the child, and we see how happy the child is, and we take happiness in the pleasure that the child has. But then the child grows up, and at a certain age, depending on how old the child was, I like asking people, how old were you when you realized that there was no Santa Claus? And actually, Renee figured it out pretty early. I think that she must have had some good parenting because it didn't take her very long.
Yeah,
to
we
figure it out.
never told her the Santa Claus story.
But she heard it from other kids.
Yeah.
So she figured it out really
She knew
early.
as soon as she heard it that there was something fishy in the story.
That's right. But I keep trying to tell her that the tooth fairy is real, but she doesn't believe me. But you know, once you realize that the self is kind of like that, and you still, you know, you still celebrate you still do what you need to do for the self. You brush your teeth and you put on clean clothes and you do what you need to do for the self. But in fact, if you realize that all of that is just like giving presents, and once you have that awareness, then it's joyful. It's like every day is this Christmas day where you're giving yourself presents. And so you give yourself presents, and then but you realize that it's just an illusion. So whatever happens during that day is illusory in that sense. It comes and goes. You don't get too disturbed. Even if somebody tells you that Santa got stuck in the chimney, you don't worry about it. He has magical powers. Okay. These are all good points that people are making. It's very difficult because we've been conditioned for not just in this lifetime, just imagine how much in this lifetime we've been conditioned to believe that in the solidity of our experiences and in the solidity of this self, this is something that we have been conditioned to believe. Now, I just want to say to all of us that if we talk about this and we're dealing with people who have mental disturbances, we have to be very careful because we don't want the person to believe that they can jump out of a window because they're empty of self. That's not what we're talking about here. That's a violation of the understanding of what we're talking about, because the real experiences exist in the conditional level. We are all existing in this conditional, conventional level, and we want to be respectful and caring and wholesome and kind. This is how we get to make the transformation. If we do harmful things, thinking, well, it doesn't really matter because we're in this, all of this is just imaginary, then we'll never get to do the transformation. The transformation is what's important, and the transformation requires us on the conventional level to be very kind and caring and loving to everyone, including ourselves. And this allows us then to go through the 5 paths. We get to go through the path of cultivation, of practice, of seeing. We get to go through these levels of cultivating and attainment. So that's the last section of slides that we don't have to worry about because it's all words. But you have them there to look at and study and look at, and you can see how these 5 stages are connected to the 37 factors of enlightenment and how it's connected to Master Zhi's formulation of meditation practice. So I hope that that's something that we can get to maybe in another time where we can just have a class on the 5 practices, maybe the 5 stages of cultivation, maybe a shorter class, maybe only part of the day. But I think that that's just something I don't want to push us to get to. Although if our intrepid helper will put up a slide for us in the slide number, I can even do the slide number. Let's look at slide number 8 in the next sequence. Oh, that's a good slide. That's a nice slide. Yeah, that's number 9 maybe. That's a good one. Or that's a little bit further along. That's okay. Yeah, that's slide number 15. But that's okay. But it's all connected. Yeah, let's go to slide number 15. That's a good place to go. So we can see that in this slide, I showed this slide when the master came from Houston. I showed him this slide and he looked at the slide and says, "Where did you get this slide?" Oh, this is an interesting slide. He liked this slide. So it has the 37 practices, the 4 foundations, the right efforts, the right roads, the 5 roots, the 5 powers, the 7 limbs, and the 8-fold path. All 37 practices are here, and then these are connected to the 5 paths. First, the stage of accumulation, and the stage of application, the stage of seeing, and the stage of cultivation, all of these stages, and then the stage of completion of all of the 37 prerequisites. All of this is interconnected. And then Master Zhi, he put this in terms of our meditation practice of how we first learn how to calm the mind. Then we learn how to regulate the mind through our Vipassana practice. We can see what to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to, how to apply the right efforts of restraining ourselves and the powers that we have to have greater insight. And then we can then learn how to really stop the mind from going where things are troublesome. We can stop the hindrances, and then we can then enter into a stage of pure observation, and then we can return the mind whenever it gets distracted, and then we can purify the mind fully in the Eightfold Path. So this is Master Zhi's. Thanks to Caddy for introducing me back to Master Zhi and how to pronounce his name. So this was very, very helpful. So I think that this brings us to very close to the end of our day. Anyone else have any other comments, complaints, criticisms, money back requests?
What was that middle part again?
Complaints, yes. Comments, criticisms, questions.
I like to share a story that I read in a book many, many years ago. Now I try to connect that story to what I learned today. It says it was a monk meditating inside a cave. Then one day, he was calling his friend outside of the cave to move him to the outside of the cave. And as soon as the friend got inside the cave, looked at him, and was surprised to see that actually this monk was bitten by a poisonous snake.
Mm-hmm.
He was about to die, but somehow his face or his behavior action didn't show at all that he was bitten by a snake. So his friend was so surprised to see that this meditator monk was actually at a very, very high level. So I was trying to connect that story to today's class. Does that mean that monk at that point at a level where he actually was able to clear up all his consciousness in a way that his perception is totally different from what we have, the level that we have nowadays? So is that how we interpreted it?
Oh, this is a good interpretation. Thank you for sharing that. I know the story. It's a good story.
Oh, you read that story too?
Yes, I know the story. Yes.
Did I remember right?
Oh, pretty close. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we know that the end is near, and if you're disturbed and distressed when the end is near, then your mind is not able to direct itself to where you would like it to go. This is why most people at the moment of death, they are not able to direct their mind. because they have fear or they're unconscious. So this is the two extremes. Either they're terrified or their mind is not able to focus. So but there are those people who at the moment of death, moment of passing, they don't have any clinging. They know that this is okay. They don't have any desire for existence, nor do they have desire for non-existence. They are completely in a state of equanimity at that moment. And so then they can see they know where their consciousness is, so they can direct their consciousness where it needs to go. If the venerables are here, I would ask them about these kinds of questions. Jade, were you able to round up any of the venerables, or are they not available? Okay. Yes.
I think Venerable Kong Shi should be here, right? Kong Shi Shifu. She's not here?
Not here?
Her screen is up, but
Maybe not,
oh, here
yes.
she comes.
I'm a student.
Oh, very good. Oh, it's good to see you. So I don't know if you have any comments about these kinds of questions that people are asking about karma and about these moments passing away, these kinds of things. If you'd like to add something, I've learned from you over the years. I want to continue.
Well, I'm still learning. Well, all these things, I think we have to wait until we're enlightened and understand the whole thing, because we are just using our perception and imaginary things, and like what we talked about, we think that it is the cause of the karma, that the Buddha got his leg was hit by by Devadatta. But things like that is not something that we can assume or trying to predict. Is something that we have to understand ourselves. We cannot blame anything on karma. Some things that happen is causing conditions, things that arise that is waiting for the time, and all things just come to be. And we cannot just say this is karma and that is. And also like the hurricane things, the lady, it's just her way of perception, her way of looking at things. And she likes to build house near the coast. She doesn't, she's not scared of rebuilding the house. So she just keep doing that. And she just liked the coast too much. She felt like, well, if there's something happening again, I will rebuild the house. So she got already the experience of doing that. So she had no fear of doing that. For other people like us, like we don't want to do that. So I would not want to stay near the coast because I don't want to rebuild the house. I thought that it's very troublesome to do all the things or to spend a lot of money doing that. So things like that, it depends on the person's perception. We cannot just, use our own way of thinking of perceive how people should think and how that person should be. And it's just aware of, understanding. The lady, she's very kind. She think about others, people suffering, and she have the ability to build house. So so she wouldn't be worried about that, but she worried about other people that cannot build house. So what she thought is just good thought, but anyway, this is what I was thinking.
Thank you very much. On this note, even though we would like to go further and go deeper into the night, I think it's a good time for us to put our palms together and to dedicate whatever merit or understanding that we've gained here today. May it be of benefit to ourselves, but also of benefit to all beings. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings enter the great equanimity, which is free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Thank you all very much for your kind attention, and I wish you all well, and see this as just the first step in your understanding of the Great Way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.